Irina has asked, the passive stroke active voice is something that, that is confusing for people. Would you be able to provide a list of examples? And the same applies to nominalization, which you also talked about. We probably haven't got time to kind of write down lots of examples, but maybe can you think of some examples sort of off the top of your head of
Yeah, well, the passive voice is
phrase?
we use people use the passive voice a lot in Cochrane reviews, and generally speaking, in the background, it's okay. So you might say something like, topical corticosteroids were first introduced in the 1950s. So it's that use of were and then the past participle that makes the passive voice there. So if I change that to the active voice, I would say I introduced topical corticosteroids in the 1950s. Obviously, I didn't, but that's an example. The example I think I gave earlier was the authors extracted the data, which is an example of the active voice, as opposed to data were extracted by the authors. If you're writing about risk of bias, you could say, we judged 6 studies to be at low risk of bias, and that would be the active voice, or 6 studies were judged to be at low risk of bias, which is the passive. And nominalizations, really, they come up all the time, but it is generally, as I said, it's things like undertook data extraction instead of we extracted data. So if you can change a phrase that's like that into a single verb, that we did something, then that's your nominalization. I hope that's helpful.
Fantastic, thank you. So, there's a bit of a debate gone in the chat itself about how you would avoid using medical jargon terms like dysphagia.
Yeah, I think it's not so difficult if you can imagine that you're talking to somebody. I suppose it depends on your background, but if you're say you're a doctor and you're explaining a condition to a patient, then you probably wouldn't use dysphagia because you think, well, my patient's probably not going to understand that. So there must be a plain language way of expressing that to people who don't have a medical background. And that was just one example. And there are also, I think it's important to note that somebody who has a particular condition may understand the technical term for it because they've been living with it. So I think you just have to use a bit of common sense and judge it. And in any case, you can always use the correct word or the medical word and give an explanation at the same time. And then you've covered all your bases.
Brilliant, thank you, Denise. So and another question asking for examples. Maybe after the clinic we can provide a link or when we send the information about the clinic out to give people perhaps more examples. Okay, I'm just scrolling down. So Alexi has asked about do you have any suggestions on how illustrations in the PLS section should be designed?
No, I'm afraid not, because at the moment we can't put illustrations in Cochrane plain language summaries. If you're not writing a plain language summary for a Cochrane review, then yes, illustrations are fabulous. They're very, very helpful, but we can't do it in Cochrane reviews at the moment, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think I've got through all the questions. Yeah, I mean, I know that some review groups in the past have used kind of visual abstracts, haven't they? Sort of like a single PowerPoint slide, which can be helpful. Yeah. If anybody else has any questions, please do put them in the chat. There's a couple of people saying thank you very much for the presentation and how helpful it is. And yeah, I think, and sorry, and Elizabeth has also clarified that we can't put links into plain language summaries at the moment as well.
No, we can't. It would be brilliant to be able to do that and to make them a bit more kind of I think it would really help them to be more informative if we could put links and illustrations in them. But I'm afraid that's not, at the moment, that's not possible.
Okay. Okay. I'll just wait a couple of minutes to see if anybody else wants to put any more questions in the chat or ask any questions. That's great. It would be really interesting to know, wouldn't it, how many people prefer to use the plain language summary as compared to the abstract, as compared to other parts of the review
Yeah.
when they
I don't have the figures, but I
review.
think that a lot of people turn first of all to the plain language summary because it is plain and it is easy to read and it should give you all the information you want. And I would just say to everybody that it's worth reading the guidance for the plain language summaries, which is in the handbook. It's not a very long document and it has lots of examples and it gives lots of really good advice. And I'm not just saying that because I was one of the authors. I think it's very useful.